Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going deep on a fundamental part of who you are, your identity. It's the thing that gives us our greatest strengths and connections, but as we're about to see, it can also be the very thing that tears us apart. All right, let's just jump right in with a really tough, unsettling question from history. How did Germany, the country of Einstein, of Beethoven, of brilliant thinkers, end up perpetrating the horrors of World War II? How does that happen? Well, in the aftermath of the war, researchers were just grappling with this. I mean, this wasn't some backwater nation. This was a place with a rich, complex culture. How could these people either participate in or just stand by and let it happen? And what they landed on was this incredibly powerful idea called social identity theory. They realized that this single, all-consuming German identity had given millions of people a sense of pride so strong that it allowed them to accept and even justify the absolute unthinkable. And that right there brings us to the central paradox of our identity. It's something we desperately need to survive and feel whole, but it also has this incredibly dangerous side. What's really fascinating is how the thinking on this has totally changed. For decades, this theory was used pretty much exclusively to explain our dark side, prejudice, discrimination. But then, more recently, psychologists discovered the flip side is also true. People with strong social identities are actually healthier, they live longer, and they're way more likely to thrive. So to really get a handle on that dark side, we first have to understand the light. Why is this need to belong so incredibly powerful? The best way to really grasp the power of belonging is to look at what happens when you don't have it. Loneliness. And it's not just a sad feeling, it's a really powerful psychological state. And this is where loneliness gets really weird. It has this kind of push and pull effect on us. On one hand, it triggers our fight or flight response, making us suspicious and wary of other people. But at the exact same time, it fires up the dopamine systems in our brain that motivate us to go find the very connections we're suddenly so afraid of. It's like an alarm bell that's pushing us towards safety, even while it's making us feel scared. This need to connect is so baked into our biology that when we get explicitly rejected, like you get broken up with or fired from a job, our brain processes that hurt using the exact same pathways as a physical injury. So that feeling of heartbreak, it's not a metaphor. Your brain is literally registering real pain. And the long-term consequences are frankly staggering. Lacking strong social connections is a bigger predictor of an early death than a bad diet or not exercising. It's been compared to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15! We are literally biologically wired for connection. So at the end of the day, belonging isn't just some warm, fuzzy feeling. It's a tool we actively use. We need groups for self-awareness, we look at others to figure out who we are and how we're supposed to act, and we use them for self-esteem, to feel valued, and maybe most importantly, to feel safe. Okay, so now we've got to look at the other side of this coin. How does this incredibly powerful, totally necessary drive to belong turn so dangerous? Well, a lot of the time, it starts with something we all do naturally. It's called social comparison. To feel good about our own group, we measure it against other groups. Sometimes that means looking up to groups we want to be like, and sometimes it means looking down on groups we decide are less than us. And that one simple act of comparison, that little need to boost our own group status, well, that's the tiny psychological seed that can grow into everything from everyday bias all the way up to the kind of atrocities we started this whole conversation with. And the danger isn't just in how we treat other people. It's what happens to us when our own identity is threatened or stripped away. You see it in the heartbreakingly high suicide risk for men who lose their work identity after retirement. You see it in communities like many Native American groups, where cultural erasure leads to devastating health crises. Losing your identity can lead to self-destruction. So if identity is both essential to our health and a potential source of great harm, what do we do? How are we supposed to find the right balance? Well, a really fascinating experiment set out to answer that very question. Can we actually consciously use our identity as a tool to fight loneliness? So researchers got a group of college students and split them in two. They told Group A to focus on their shared social identity. They asked, what are 5 great things about being a student at this college? Then they told Group B to focus on their personal identity. What are 5 things that make you, as an individual, totally unique? And the results? Whoa. They were absolutely stunning. The group that focused on their shared identity, their feelings of loneliness dropped by almost half. But the group that focused only on what made them unique, their reported loneliness almost doubled. The takeaway here is pretty clear. Actively thinking about the groups we belong to, our shared identities, is an incredibly powerful psychological tool. It creates connection and acts like a direct antidote to loneliness. But of course, in the real world, it's never that simple, is it? Most of us are constantly juggling competing identities. Think about an Asian American student trying to balance a cultural identity that values family obligation with a broader American identity that prizes individualism. That kind of conflict can literally make you feel stuck. It can cause what psychologists call a loss of future time orientation, which is just a fancy way of saying you lose the ability to see a path forward for yourself. You see this all the time in recent graduates who get hit with depression as they struggle to bridge that massive gap between their student identity and whatever their future professional one is supposed to be. So all of this leaves us with a final thought, a question to really reflect on. Our identity is our greatest source of strength, of health, and of connection. But it takes constant, conscious effort to really understand our own groups without devaluing others, to make sure that the very thing that helps us feel like we belong doesn't just end up building walls.